remember.
All right. That's my guy right there, Matt Halatic from the spun.com. He's the editor and publisher of what I think is the absolute best. Sorry, Matt, I hit record before we were done. I thought you were done. The very best website where pop culture meets sports. Really encourage you to go there. He's been joining me for a long time every week talking ball. I am Hondo Carpenter, your Las Vegas Raiders beat writer on SI and the host of the Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast. We got a lot to talk about today, Matt. Man, we are just full of information. I'm going to be, soon as we're done today, I'm getting on a plane going to NOLA for the Super Bowl. I'll be there all week. Excuse me. So let's start. The Raiders end up at Pete Carroll. We originally broke the story. I think it was almost 3 weeks ago. It may have been 4, but I think 3. That Pete Carroll was an absolute legitimate candidate. That was not a story we broke. But what we did break is someone in the building had told us that if Pete got the job, it was going to be because a couple of other choices didn't pan out. Mark Davis admitted that, saying, we went after a guy. When he went a different direction, we pivoted to Pete. Mark said no offer was made, which is absolutely truthful. We never reported an offer. We said we had heard among the NFL it was probably going to have to be 15 mil guaranteed for 6 years, $90 million. But they're not allowed to make an offer while he was still in the playoffs. So there was no offer. But even other national media talked about NFL people were very upset with what the Raiders were going to offer. People knew it was going to be a huge sum of money. All said and done, I think I know that fans are excited about Ben, but I know going into the search, they wanted somebody with experience. That was not Ben. They got Tomlin by him a little bit. He wooed him. But after all, I think it works out really good for the Raiders. If you had said to me before the search, you can have Pete Carroll or Ben Johnson, I'd take Pete Carroll 100 times out of 100. It doesn't mean I think Ben's a bad coach. I've said multiple times, the Raiders and a few other iconic franchises are not where you go to learn how to coach. And I think this was a great move by the Raiders. I'd love your thoughts.
Well, I talked about this on the show. Had to be about almost a month ago at this point. When there was talk about Mike Vrabel, if the Raiders would be interested in him, and I said I think that the Raiders, and I think teams that have a lot of media coverage and teams that have been struggling for a while. I think the best thing they could do is they need a culture setter. They need somebody who's done it before. You had a guy in Antonio Pierce who, was learning on the job, and they took a chance there, and it didn't work out the way they'd hoped. Josh McDaniels had done it before, but that was just a disaster all around. Now you got a guy who's won Super Bowls, coached in Super Bowls. He's 73, but still a young 73 by all accounts. It's not like he had, 5 years away from the NFL and is coming back. He was a head coach in 2023 and was an advisor with the Seahawks this past year. I think that in order to set that baseline competency and the direction that you want the Raiders to go in, I think it's a great choice. I had a friend of mine who was a Seahawks fan disagree with me on Twitter, and we kind of had not a disagreement, but just kind of him sharing his thoughts. He felt that from watching up close that Pete Carroll got more stubborn as he the last couple of years of his tenure, and he thinks that that might not be good for the Raiders. But to me, the way I see it is this is a guy who he turned the Seahawks around. Yes, he was in his late 50s when he did it, but he turned around the Seahawks. He kept them competitive in recent years, even after all those Legion of Boom defenders and all those studs left and retired or went to other teams. When Russell Wilson was declining a little bit, when they finally moved on from Russell Wilson and they started over with Geno Smith, he kept them competitive. He kept them in playoff contention. And I think that that's, what you're hoping for the Raiders. I think for the Raiders, you have to look at it. You're starting at ground zero here. You're behind the Chiefs. the Chargers and the Broncos because the Broncos made strides with Sean Payton. But you want to get that base, that foundation. I think Pete Carroll's the guy to do it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I want to turn to Tom Brady. Mark Davis had some interesting comments that clicked in my head. And then Mike Florio at Pro Football Talk had the same thoughts. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, I'm not a friend of Florio. I'm not an enemy. Him and I have actually, had interactions before, especially when not especially, but when I was the beat reporter covering the Lions. I don't always agree with his takes. I think he comes off as bombastic, but I've never found Mike Florio to be insincere. Again, bombastic for sure. Opinionated, absolutely. He's an attorney. But I've never found him to be insincere. Everything that he says, I truly believe Mike believes. Whether I agree with it or not is a different story. But he picked up on something that I picked up on. And Mark Davis talked about, for the first time since John Gruden got his head chopped off, which I thought was phenomenal. We'll talk more about that in a minute. That now Tom Brady's going to bring stability. Well, technically, Tom Brady isn't in the building every day, which he's not. That's true. They kind of have to be careful how much they talk about his relationship. But you just hired John Spytek to be your GM, and Pete Carroll, a future Hall of Famer. I think it would have helped the Raiders. Well, I don't believe that Mark said anything that's not true. I think, though, it would have maybe helped the Raiders a little bit if he said, hey, we're looking for John Spytek and Pete Carroll to bring some stability, even though everybody knows Tom's running it, the football side. I just found that interesting. And so when Florio picked up on it, I thought, you know what? I'm going to ask Matt, what did you think of that?
Yeah, it's interesting because I didn't even, to be honest with you, I saw the comments, and I saw the Florio post, but I didn't even really think of that angle because to me, I felt like it's obvious that Tom Brady's having a massive influence, and the Raiders already said he would and he will. But the one thing that to go to your point is, and we said this a couple weeks ago when we talked about why, will Mark Davis start getting credit as a better, as a good owner, and I said that it'll start when they win, but be careful because if they start winning now, a lot of that credit is going to go to Tom Brady. We know how it's going to say. They're going to say Brady, he got in the building, he changed the culture, even though he's not there every day. His influence is on the team. Obviously John Spytek and Pete Carroll have great reputations, and they'll get credit too. But I do think Tom Brady will be looked at publicly. The narrative will be is he's the driving force. So that is interesting. I suppose that it maybe they would have been better off saying kind of putting it on the feet of the people who will be there every day and be acting things out every day. But I think Brady is having such an influence and is going to set the tone so much that you'd be foolish to kind of ignore that type of role.
I agree. And I'm going to say something. And I know that a lot of people disagree with this, but I think Tom Brady should get the credit if they start winning. But I just think Mark Davis deserves more because Tom Brady's weak people don't want strong people around them. Nick Saban has a saying that I love, and I use this all the time. Weak-minded people hate overachievers, and overachievers hate weak-minded people. The fact that Mark Davis was willing to bring Tom in and give him so much control and not hide it, I think says a lot to Mark's mentality of winning, and it certainly says he's not weak-minded. All right, I want to go to Cliff Kingsbury. I find this fascinating to me. He turns down a chance, could have went to a lot of places, could have went to Chicago, could have went to the Saints, but was smart enough to say, none of these are good jobs. They're loser organizations for a reason. Years ago, one of my very best friends on planet Earth is Butch Jones, and you know that. Butch was the coach of Central Michigan, did an amazing job. He goes and gets the job at Cincinnati. where he does a great job at Cincinnati, has him going into the BCS. I mean, Bull, he did a phenomenal job. He was debating taking the Colorado Buffaloes job. And he called me and we talked about it, prayed about it, whatever. And he didn't think that was what he was supposed to, even though it was a great offer from a great school. They were all in, had nothing to do with them. It just had to do, he just didn't feel like it was the right time. So he goes, and then the Tennessee job comes up. And I remember he and I discussing it in great detail. I'm not going to get into those discussions. That wouldn't be fair to Butch. But I remember, I can say this because I said it, is I said Tennessee is one of those places that there's a lot of good, but there's a lot of things that go against Tennessee winning. And sometimes the best job you have is the one you got. Mm-hmm. And he ended up going to Tennessee. He made life-altering money. He was making that at Tennessee. I mean, at Cincinnati, just not as much. But and even though he had the number one recruiting class and all these things he'd done well, one bad season, they blow him out. No big deal. He's financially set for the rest of his life, his grandchildren, his great-grandchildren, and now he's doing a tremendous job at Arkansas State. But the point is, sometimes coaches, they're not patient. They preach patience to their players, and they're not. I have not been a big Cliff Kingsbury guy because of some things I won't talk about on air. But he's earning my respect now. I think as he's growing up and he's maturing, he's understanding, hey, sometimes the best job is the one I got. I don't need to go take a bad job. I'll give you another one. Dr. Clarence Underwood, who was the first Black athletic director in major college sports, is a dear friend of Shannon and I's. And he talked about, that sometimes coaches make rush decisions because they so badly want to be a head coach, and it goes to a bad place where everybody gets fired quick, they get fired quick, and now you'll never get a second chance. And he talked about waiting for the right spot. Pat Narduzzi, number one assistant coach in America, had plenty of opportunities to go somewhere. He didn't jump. Texas A&M, Kevin Sumlin, all these people tried to hire him. He says, no, I'm going to wait. I remember talking Pat through that process. Then Pittsburgh opened, a dream place, a place where they want their coaches to stay, where he doesn't have to go and look, makes the right move. I think what Cliff Kingsbury did was smart, earned a lot of respect. I love your thoughts.
Well, he came out and flat out said it would take a lot for me to leave this kid, meaning Jaden Daniels. And I think when you're a coach and and Cliff Kingsbury coached Patrick Mahomes in college. He coached Kyler Murray when he had one of maybe his best season as an NFL player so far. He knows what it's like to work with a great quarterback. And he's got one with Jaden Daniels. So this is a team in Washington that's ahead of schedule. Nobody really even thought going into the year they'd make the playoffs, let alone get to the NFC Championship game. You can't say for sure if they'll be right back there next year, but they're going to be in contention for good things. I think as long as Jaden Daniels is there, because he's that talented and that special. So for me, if you're Cliff Kingsbury, why you don't want to just take any job? He's already been an NFL head coach. He saw how quickly that can turn. In his second season, he goes 3-game improvement. They go 8-8. Then the following year's third season, they're 11-6. They I believe they won a division. And if they didn't win a division, they definitely they made the playoffs. So they had a playoff berth, and they lose, and then they go 4-13, and he's out. All it takes is one bad year, and you're done. And to me, I think that he's going to say, listen, I got a great situation here, work with a great talent. We can do great things. I'm not leaving this unless a really good situation comes up. And I think that you are looking at some people down the line might be projecting that better jobs could open up next year. You see Mike McCarthy pulling himself out of this coaching search, thinking that 2026 might be better. So I think for Cliff Kingsbury, exercising patience is a smart move.
You segued right into my next question. I mean, Mike McCarthy we told everybody if the Cowboys let him go, he would absolutely get offers this. He could have had a couple of jobs this cycle. Again, smart. I'm not going to take a wrong. I'm not going to jump for the sake of jumping. I think we're starting to see NFL people. So, like, for example, let's talk about Aaron Glenn. I think Aaron Glenn has the ability to be a great NFL coach. I don't think he has the ability to be a good. I think he can be great. I'm not a friend, know him a little bit. Him and I have several mutual friends. To me, the Jets are a place you go to get fired. It's a losing job. And not because of Aaron Glenn, but because of the structure above it. I was so disappointed to see Aaron take that job. Now, I hope he does well. I'm rooting for the guy. I like him a lot. But to me, it's a place where you go to get fired. I think McCarthy is showing a bunch of wisdom, and Cliff.
Well, I think Aaron Glenn also probably he has that connection to the Jets from playing there, and he was part of the players, the group that turned around that team under Bill Parcells. So perhaps there's that competitor in him saying, "I can do as a coach what I did as a player." So I understand there was
I get it.
There was intangible stuff there with him. This, that overweight or whatever. You know what I'm trying to say. It outweighed the concerns over the Jets organization. But I think if you're Mike McCarthy, you coached for a long time with the Packers, and you were pretty much always in contention there. They move on from you. You go to the Cowboys, where you're a high-profile job. You're in the playoffs 3 years out of 5, and they didn't win big in the postseason, but they were a good team. They had a lot of talent. Excuse me. If you're Mike McCarthy, you're thinking about, hey, maybe next year a job opens up where I can win right away, as opposed to the Saints where, it's not the strongest division in the NFL, so you can make some strides there, but they don't have a quarterback right now. Long term, they still have Derek Carr right now under contract, but they have all their cap issues. They have other things that concern. So why would I go there? Why wouldn't I wait it out to see, if something better opens up? And I think that you're going to you'll see as the hiring cycle, not the hiring cycle, as the season plays out next year, and the rumors start about what coaches are going to get fired as teams start to struggle, or what coaches do get fired during the season, you're going to hear Mike McCarthy and Cliff Kingsbury mentioned as names.
Absolutely. I want to turn to you. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I'll give you a quick example. I think, pretty much everybody expects the Giants to clean house after next season. And I think if they start to do that, or they're struggling again in 2025 and people are talking about getting fired, you'll hear both those names suggested for them. Not saying those guys will have interest or vice versa, but that's one job you'll hear for guys like that.
All right. I want to turn attention to Jalen Hurts.
Mm-hmm.
I like Jalen a lot. He is a wonderful kid. If you ever got to spend time with him, you got to make sure you do it. He is so pleasant and warm. He's just a great kid. But he kind of took a shot at Nick Sirianni. And I thought, you know what? Good for Jalen. I was proud of him. He didn't come out guns blazing, but he took a little bit of a shot, and I was glad. I think it did him a lot of good in that locker room. And I'm not guessing there. I know it did him a lot of good in that locker room. Talk about it. Were you surprised? And how come Nick Sirianni that guy it's almost like they're winning in spite of him.
Well, I will say this. By all reports coming out, the players love Sirianni personally. There's been other stuff saying that they really connect with him. They love the way he goes to bat for them. They love, the way he has their back and the way he leads that way. I was a little surprised at the, let me out of my straitjacket comment, considering they just won the NFC title and they're going to the Super Bowl. But I get it for a little bit with Jaylen, because you saw it in the regular season after he had a good game against Pittsburgh, and he came into the press conference with the Kangol hat, and he's like, what are they going to say now? because here's the thing, and I understand he's a competitor. We know he's a competitor. For most of the year, especially after the Eagles got out of their own way after the first month when they were 2-2 and they got rolling, everyone has talked about how great the Eagles are, how great Saquon Barkley is, how great their O-line is, how great their defense has been playing. And the weak link has always been Jalen Hurts. And everyone's always said, talked about can they win a Super Bowl with Jalen Hurts? Yeah, Barkley's great, but if you can make Jalen Hurts make a mistake, or you can beat them, or this and that, and they keep winning. And I think Jalen Hurts is probably tired of hearing that he is the weak link and they can't depend on him. And he played great on Sunday. They had 7 rushing touchdowns, but he had 3 of them, and he threw the ball very well, made plays downfield. Obviously, the tone setter was the long Barkley touchdown, the first play from scrimmage, but Jalen Hurts connected with some big plays for Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. Huge 4th down conversion in that first half, but when they really needed it. And, it was a big game for him. So I think that he played very well in the Super Bowl 2 years ago. They still lost to the Chiefs. They're going to need him to play well again this time around. But I think he's capable of doing it. And I think he knows that if they win the Super Bowl, most of the credit's going to go to Saquon Barkley and the O-line and the defense. But I think he wants some of that recognition. And I think that's understandable.
I agree. All right, I want to talk to you about the Chiefs owner. His wife comes out and kind of rips people for saying the Chiefs are only winning because of the refs. I like it. I think it's hilarious. I think that's what you want from an owner. We're beating you, so now you're going to come up with all the excuses. I think that's fun. I think she's taken a lot of ribbing from the other 31 teams, and I get that. That's what rivalries and fanatics, that's why they're called fans, do. So I understand the teams that are like, oh, be quiet, it's because you're winning. And I love the fact that she comes out. I just think it's fun when you see owners who break that sterile mold. I think it's funny. I think it's great. I love it. I love it from everybody's perspective. Your thoughts?
I think it's good too. I think that if you're the Chiefs, you have to kind of almost embrace this role and embrace, that you're the villains a little bit. You know that you're going to get the ref stuff is going to be a conversation from now through, forever. Eternity, as long as you keep winning. Even if they lose in 2 weeks, I'm sure there'll be people saying, well, the Eagles beat them and the refs to win the Super Bowl. Right. And again, I think when you look at this run that they're on, keep in mind the Hunt family, I'm not sure how long Clark and Tavia Hunt have been married, but obviously she's been around for a long time. The Hunt family's owned the Chiefs forever. This was a team that, yes, they had tradition, but this was a team that hadn't done a lot of winning in the playoffs until Andy Reid got there, and really until Patrick Mahomes took over the starting job. They were always a team that kind of were on the cusp, but they couldn't get it done. Now they're enjoying being maybe the greatest dynasty ever in the NFL if they win 3 in a row and they keep on going. So I don't blame them at all. I think that this is what any ownership would kill for. So have some fun with it.
Totally agree with you. All right. A couple of weeks ago, I made some waves when I said that I had heard from 2 NFL people. Now I think it's 4 that had the number 1 quarterback in the draft that they all had as a number 1 and a first-round grade was Cam Ward. 2 of them had Jackson Dart with a very low second round, but all of them had Jackson Dart as number 2. That continues to kind of be the thought process going through these bowl, these bowl games. Mm-hmm. When I say the bowl games, I'm talking about the postseason games for those eligible for the draft. And Shedeur, again, I've had several tell me, I think as many as 6 quarterbacks can go, but there's only 1 that we have a first-round grade on. So I want to ask you, Jackson Dart is a second-round prospect. I think it's very fair. But a guy that really hurt himself this week a little bit was Milroe. And not hurt himself like he's a bad kid.
No, yeah.
But he has extremely small hands. And in the NFL, that's dangerous because you've got some huge men trying to knock the ball out of your hands. And the guys with the smaller hands traditionally have issues with fumbles or issues with turnovers. And more importantly, accuracy, because the bigger the hand allows you to spin with more follow through. I thought that was fascinating. What do you think about our reporting on Cam Ward? And now it's coming out. He is the clear number one. And what is your thoughts on Jackson Dart?
Obviously, almost 3 months to go, things change. There's always different, the way this process plays out. But I think that Cam Ward is, trending towards being that number one overall, if not the number one overall pick, the first quarterback taken. Jackson Dart is starting to seems to really be raising his profile, at least among NFL media, and we're hearing from teams on the back end the same thing. Jalen Milroe to me is a project at quarterback, and I think that he's showing he's a project. I think that if you're going to take him, you got to take him on day 2 and really be okay with using him in specific situations to start and molding him behind an established guy. You can't bring him in thinking he's going to play as a rookie. I think that's a huge mistake. But the interesting thing is, there's a bunch of teams at the top of the draft who, as we sit here today, are quarterback needy. The Titans need one. The Browns need one. The Giants need one. The Raiders are sitting there. They need one. Are all the opportunities going to be there? And what do you think? The Raiders, they're not in position to get they may not be in position to get one of these top guys without trading around. What do you think they would do if they're sitting there at 6, and they keep that pick? Who do you think would be the targets?
I think they're going to go Genty, the running back at Boise. Now, granted, Spytek's in here, so that's a new look. But I can tell you this, prior to the change, the Raiders were scouting him heavily. And I don't know that Tampa was scouting him as heavily, but I know Tampa was. And I just know that the Pete Carroll system relies on you've got to have a guy. Now, I think they've got some guys, but until you know you have the guy, you have to keep drafting. And that is the Pete Carroll way. How many quarterbacks did he bring in to Seattle till he had his guy? I think right now, if I had to pick today, I think they take Genty if they keep 6. But here is the thing that fascinates me. I like Shedeur. I like him a lot. I like Dion. I like him a lot. But there is so much attention, and rightfully so, by the way, around Dion in the program, that now that he's moved out of his dad's light, I think his game is coming a little bit more into perspective. And this is not a slam, but I think it's just people are realizing, okay, listen, somebody's going to take Shedeur high. And he may turn out, and by the way, let me just make this clear. Wherever he goes, I hope he works out because I think he's a good kid.
Mm-hmm.
But the chances are already, since he's a first-round pick, he's a 60% fail. I think the chances are much higher than that because I think I think you got a 40% chance that Cam Ward is going to be what you think Cam Ward is. I think you got a 25% shot that Shedeur will. Now, if he goes out and turns out to be pro, Honda, you only gave him a 25% shot. You're right. And that's all they did give him, and it's all they will give him. But to me, this is where we talk about bad drafting. Somebody is going to take him. And okay, let's look at Anthony Richardson. Goes to the Indianapolis. We said at the time, this is a guy very raw, lots of great talent. He may hit, but Everybody I talked to that's a good drafter said, no way are we touching him in the first round. Okay. He came in, he did some things really well. Everybody's like, well, tap the brakes, hold on a little bit. I just think that sometimes the hype machine, everybody thinks the panacea is a first round quarterback. No, it's a quarterback who can win, whether it's the first round or free or late rounds like a Tom Brady or a free agent, an undrafted free agent like a Brock Purdy. The point is, it's the panacea is not the round. The panacea is the guy. I find the bad drafting fascinating. And what do you think about what's happening with Shedeur?
Well, it does seem like you're starting to see more questions about his game. He didn't throw at the Senior Bowl. You'll start to see more about like how he handles his workouts going forward. I think another issue that you're going to have to deal with is teams that are picking near the top of the draft that need quarterbacks are typically bad teams or teams that had bad seasons the year before. And I think that if he gets picked by one of those teams and they struggle, even if he's the one that's struggling too, if they're losing, the whispers are going to start from ESPN and from Fox Sports and from all the major networks that the team needs to fire its coach and hire Dion. And you're going to have all of those whispers going too. So if he goes to the Browns and they struggle, well, they got to get rid of Kevin Stefanski and bring in Dion. The Titans, get rid of Brian Callahan. The Giants, get rid of Brian Dable and bring in Dion. And that's going to be a storyline. So you have
I'm sorry, go ahead.
You have your concerns about his game, perhaps, and then you have also the ancillary stuff too.
So I had a GM tell me that Tim Tebow was a winner in the NFL. I mean, he won playoff games. But Tim Tebow's downfall was the entire circus that came with him. Everyone wanted him to be the starter. And the guy goes, he was out of the league earlier than he should have been, and it wasn't his fault. It was the fan reaction. I think that's going to hurt Shedeur also. I think that's going to be fascinating. All right, next week from NOLA, you and I will be talking on Super Bowl Sunday before I head to the Dome. We're going to get our picks. It's going to be a fascinating one, my friend. Matt, tell everybody again how to find you on social media.
You can find me at Matt Hladik at MATTHLADIK 919 at for X or Twitter, whatever you're calling it these days. And I'm over there talking ball and hanging out with whoever's following me. I know a bunch of Raider fans have joined up, so the more the merrier.
Thanks, brother.
Anytime.